The desert wind carried dust and secrets across the Arizona Territory in the summer of 1878. Sarah Morning Bird knew both intimately. She pressed herself against the canyon wall, her breath coming in short gasps as the sound of horses echoed through the narrow passage behind her. The riders were getting closer. She could hear their voices now, rough and eager, like wolves closing in on wounded prey. Her hand instinctively moved to the small leather pouch hanging around her neck, the one her grandmother had given her before the soldiers came. Inside was a single turquoise stone, smooth from generations of worried fingers. It was all she had left of her people. The Apache band she belonged to had been decimated 3 months earlier. Not by soldiers this time, but by something far worse, betrayal from within. A rival faction had accused her family of collaborating with the white settlers, of trading information for food and safety. The accusation was false, born from jealousy and old grudges that ran deeper than canyon rivers. But truth meant nothing when blood was demanded. The council had met in secret, and when the sun rose the next morning, Sarah found the mark on her family's tent. 3 red lines painted in ochre. The sign of condemnation. Her father had seen it first and immediately began preparing for flight. There would be no trial, no chance to speak in their defense. The mark meant death, swift and certain. They had run that very night. Her father, mother, younger brother, and Sarah herself, just 17 years old. They traveled by darkness, avoiding the main trails, surviving on cactus fruit and whatever small game her father could trap. 4 weeks they evaded the hunters, moving steadily west toward the mountains where her mother had cousins in a different band. They almost made it. Almost. The attack came at dawn in a dry wash 20 miles from safety. Sarah had been gathering wood when she heard her mother's scream cut short. She ran back to find them surrounded. Her father fought with everything he had, but there were too many. She watched from behind a boulder as they fell, one by one. Her brother, barely 12, tried to run and was cut down before he made 10 steps. Sarah should have died that day too. She wanted to. Wanted to rush out screaming and join her family in whatever lay beyond. But her father's last words echoed in her mind, spoken to her just the night before as they huddled around a tiny fire. If something happens, you run. You live. You carry our story forward. So she ran. Ran while her family's blood soaked into the thirsty earth. Ran while the hunters celebrated their kill. Ran until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out beneath her. That was 3 days ago, and they had been tracking her ever since. Now she was trapped in this canyon with nowhere left to go. The walls rose sheer on either side, too steep to climb. Ahead, the passage narrowed to a crack barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Behind, the sound of horses grew louder with each heartbeat. Sarah looked at the sky, that endless blue dome that seemed to mock her desperation. She thought of her grandmother's stories about the spirit world, about how the dead watched over the living. If that was true, her family was watching now. She whispered a prayer in Apache, asking for strength, for courage, for a miracle she didn't believe would come. The riders appeared around the bend, 6 of them, faces hard with purpose. Their leader, a man called Running Fox, smiled when he saw her cornered. He had been her father's rival for years, and now he would finish what he started. Sarah straightened her spine and faced them. If this was her end, she would meet it standing. Running Fox raised his rifle. The other men spread out, blocking any escape. Sarah closed her eyes and waited for the shot. Instead, she heard something else. A voice, deep and commanding, speaking in heavily accented Apache. "That's far enough." Her eyes snapped open. A white man sat on horseback at the canyon entrance behind the hunters, a rifle held casually across his saddle. He was tall and weathered, with gray threaded through his dark beard. His eyes were the color of winter ice, and they held no fear whatsoever. Running Fox turned his horse slowly, sizing up this unexpected interruption. His men shifted nervously, hands moving toward weapons but not quite drawing them. The stranger's rifle hadn't moved, but everyone in that canyon understood it could move very fast if needed. "This doesn't concern you, white man," Running Fox said in English, his tone carrying both warning and curiosity. "Ride away while you still can." The rancher tilted his head slightly, as if considering the suggestion. Then he shook his head once, a simple gesture that carried absolute finality. "Can't do that," he said, switching to English himself. His voice was rough, like gravel sliding down stone. "That girl you're about to kill just saved my horses from a mountain lion 2 days back. Scared it off with nothing but rocks and shouting. Bravest damn thing I've seen in 20 years out here. I owe her a debt." Sarah stared at the man in confusion. She had no memory of seeing him before, let alone saving his horses. But as she watched him face down 6 armed men without a tremor in his hands, she realized the truth didn't matter. He was lying to give her value, to give these hunters a reason to think twice. Running Fox seemed to realize it too. His face darkened with anger. You lied to protect her. You don't even know who she is or what she's done. The rancher shrugged. Don't need to know. What I see is 6 men chasing one girl through the desert like cowards. That's all I need to know. The insult hung in the air like smoke. Several of the hunters growled in their throats, hands tightening on weapons. Running Fox held up a hand, stopping them. He was many things, but he wasn't stupid. This white man wasn't some lost traveler or frightened settler. The way he sat his horse, the casual confidence of his posture, the complete absence of fear in his eyes, these were the marks of someone who had faced death many times and was still here to talk about it. You're Thomas Merrick, Running Fox said suddenly, recognition lighting his face. The one they call Ghost Walker. The rancher, Merrick, didn't confirm or deny it, but Sarah saw something flicker across his expression. She had heard the name before, whispered around campfires. Thomas Merrick was a legend on the frontier, though not the kind white people usually celebrated. He had lived with the Apache for years, some said. Had married into the tribe before disease took his wife and child. He had fought both with and against various bands depending on the circumstances, answering to no authority but his own strange code of honor. The Apache called him Ghost Walker because he moved through their lands like smoke, appearing and disappearing without warning. Some respected him. Others feared him. All knew better than to underestimate him. This girl is marked for death by Apache law, Running Fox said, trying a different approach. Her family was condemned by the council for betraying the people. This is our way, our justice. You know our customs. You have no right to interfere. Merrick was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah felt hope dying in her chest. If he believed Running Fox, if he accepted their law as legitimate, he would ride away and leave her to her fate. But then he spoke, and his words changed everything. I know your customs better than most white men. I also know Running Fox, son of Gray Eagle, who was cast out of his own band 15 years ago for lying about a raid. Who blamed another warrior for his own cowardice and got that warrior killed. Who has spent every year since then building power in a new band, always hungry for more. The canyon went deadly silent. Sarah could see the fury building in Running Fox's face, turning his skin dark with rage. How did this white man know these things? How did he know secrets that even she had never heard? But she saw the truth of it in the way the other hunters looked at their leader, saw doubt creeping into their eyes. Those are lies, Running Fox hissed. Told by my enemies. Merrick shook his head slowly. No. They're truths told by my wife before she died. She was Gray Eagle's niece. She told me all about her family, including the cousin who brought shame on them all. You think I don't know why you want this girl dead? It's not about justice. It's about revenge. Her father was there that day 15 years ago. He testified against you. Now his whole family pays the price. Sarah's mind reeled. Could it be true? Had her father known Running Fox in the past? She remembered once, years ago, her father going silent when Running Fox's name was mentioned. She had thought it was simple dislike. Now she wondered if it was something deeper, something tangled in old pain and older sins. Running Fox's hand moved toward his rifle. Enough talk, he snarled. Get out of my way or die with her. Merrick smiled then, a cold expression that made Sarah's blood chill even from across the canyon. There are 6 of you, he said conversationally. I'll kill 3 before you can turn your horses around. Maybe 4 if you're slow. Question is, which 3 want to die for Running Fox's revenge? Which of you want to leave your children fatherless because this man can't let go of the past? The hunters exchanged glances. Sarah could see the calculation happening behind their eyes. She saw loyalty warring with survival, duty fighting against common sense. One by one, their hands moved away from their weapons. Running Fox saw it too. Cowards, he spat at his men. Then his eyes fixed on Merrick with pure hatred. This isn't over, Ghost Walker. Mark my words. Merrick's expression didn't change. It never is, he said quietly. Running Fox jerked his horse around and kicked it into motion. His men followed, though Sarah noticed they kept glancing back at Merrick, seeing him with new eyes. When the sound of hoofbeats finally faded into silence, Sarah's legs gave out. She slid down the canyon wall, trembling with relief and delayed terror. Merrick dismounted and walked toward her. Sarah watched Merrick approach with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. He moved carefully, keeping his hands visible, the way someone moves around a frightened animal. When he was 10 feet away, he stopped and lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the ground, making himself less threatening. "You speak English?" he asked. Sarah nodded slowly. Her father had insisted she learn, saying the world was changing and knowledge of the white man's tongue might save her life one day. He had been right, though not in the way either of them expected. "Good," Merrick continued. "Makes this easier. My name's Thomas Merrick. I run cattle about 15 miles west of here. And before you wonder, I didn't lie about everything back there. You did save 3 of my horses. You just don't remember because you were unconscious at the time." Sarah frowned in confusion. Merrick pulled a canteen from his belt and set it on the ground between them, then slid it toward her with his boot. She grabbed it eagerly, her throat burning with thirst. The water was warm but tasted like salvation. 3 days ago, Merrick explained, I was tracking strays in the hills. Found you passed out in a dry creek bed. You were in bad shape, dehydrated, feet torn up from running. While I was trying to wake you, a mountain lion came sniffing around my horses. You came to just enough to see it, grabbed a handful of rocks, and started throwing them while screaming like a banshee. Scared the cat off, then passed out again. I got you to shade, gave you water, left you some jerky in this. He pulled a small bundle from his throw bag and tossed it to her. Inside was dried meat, hardtack, and a worn blanket. When I came back to check on you the next day, you were gone. Been tracking you since, trying to make sure you were all right. Instead, I found those 6 idiots hunting you like an animal. Sarah studied his face, searching for deception. She remembered nothing of what he described, but the gap in her memory felt right. She had been running so long, pushing herself so hard, that collapse would have been inevitable. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why help me? You don't know me." Merrick was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "My wife was Apache," he said softly. "Chiricahua band. Her name was Walks with Dawn. We had a daughter, little thing with her mother's eyes and her mother's laugh. They both died of fever 7 years back. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear that laugh. Like bells in the wind." He looked at Sarah directly, and she saw old pain living behind those ice-blue eyes. "You're about the age my daughter would have been if she'd lived. And when I saw those men chasing you, all I could think was that nobody was there to protect my family when they needed it. Maybe I can't bring them back, but I can damn well make sure another father's daughter doesn't die alone in the desert." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Tears she had been holding back for days suddenly broke free, streaming down her dust-caked face. She wept for her family, for this strange man's family, for all the loss and violence that seemed to flow endlessly across these lands. Merrick looked away, giving her privacy in her grief, and she loved him a little for that kindness. When she finally regained control, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Running fox won't stop," she said. "He'll come for me again. For both of us now. You've made an enemy today." Merrick stood and stretched, his joints popping audibly. "Running fox has been my enemy since before you were born. Just never had a reason to do anything about it until now. Besides, he won't come at us directly. Not after today. He's a snake, prefers to strike from hiding. We'll have time to prepare." Sarah struggled to her feet, using the canyon wall for support. Her legs felt like water, but she forced them steady. "I can't go to your ranch," she said. "It will bring trouble to your door. I should keep moving, find somewhere far away." Merrick shook his head firmly. "You'd be dead in 3 days. Look at yourself. You're exhausted, half-starved, and your feet are bleeding through your moccasins. You need food, rest, and time to heal. My ranch is defensible and I've got supplies. You'll stay there until you're strong enough to make real decisions about your future." Sarah wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her. The adrenaline that had kept her moving was draining away, leaving her hollow and shaking. "I have nothing to pay you with," she said quietly. "No money, no goods, nothing. All I have is this." She touched the leather pouch at her neck. Merrick waved the concern away. "You saved my horses, remember? We're square. Now come on, let's get you on my horse before you fall down again." He walked to his mount, a sturdy roan gelding with patient eyes, and held out his hand. Sarah hesitated only a moment before taking it. His grip was calloused and strong, and he lifted her into the saddle with ease. He swung up behind her, keeping a respectful distance, and turned the horse toward home. As they rode out of the canyon, Sarah glanced back once at the place where she had nearly died. The sun was lower now, painting the rocks in shades of red and gold. It looked beautiful and deadly all at once, just like everything else in this harsh land. What was your wife's favorite thing? Sarah asked suddenly. When she was happy, what did she love most? Merrick was silent for so long that Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. Then his voice came, rough with memory. Mornings. She loved mornings. Used to wake up before dawn just to watch the sun rise. Said every sunrise was a promise that the world could begin again, fresh and clean. Sarah closed her eyes, swaying with the rhythm of the horse. My father loved mornings too. Said they were when the spirits were closest to the living world. They rode on through the lengthening shadows, two people bound together by loss and chance, heading toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the desert wind erased their tracks, as if the canyon and its near tragedy had never existed at all. But Sarah knew better. Some things could never be erased. Some marks went deeper than dust and stone. She touched her grandmother's turquoise stone and wondered what promises tomorrow's sunrise might bring. Merrick's ranch appeared in the valley like an oasis of human persistence against the desert's indifference. The main house was adobe and timber, built low and strong against the wind. A barn stood nearby, sturdy and well-maintained. Corrals held a dozen horses, and cattle dotted the surrounding grassland. It wasn't grand, but it was clean and functional, the home of a man who valued practicality over display. As they rode up, a dog barked from the porch, an old hound with graying muzzle and friendly eyes. That's Bear, Merrick said. Useless as a guard dog but good company. He helped Sarah down from the horse, and she nearly collapsed the moment her feet touched ground. Merrick caught her easily and half-carried her to the house. Inside was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. Handmade furniture sat arranged for function rather than fashion. But what caught Sarah's attention was the wall opposite the fireplace. It was covered with small carved figures, dozens of them, each no bigger than her hand. Animals, people, trees, all rendered in intricate detail. I carve, Merrick said, following her gaze. Helps me think. Helps me remember. He guided her to a chair and disappeared into a back room. Sarah sank into the seat gratefully, her body screaming with exhaustion. Merrick returned with bandages, salve, and a basin of water. He knelt before her and gently removed her tattered moccasins. Her feet were a mess of cuts and blisters, caked with dried blood and dirt. He cleaned them with surprising gentleness, his large hands careful and precise. Knew a medicine woman once, he said as he worked. Walks with Dawn's aunt. She taught me about treating wounds, about what plants help with pain and fever. Never thought I'd use half of what she showed me, but knowledge has a way of becoming useful when you least expect it. He applied the salve, and Sarah hissed at the sting. Burns for a moment, then helps, Merrick assured her. He wrapped her feet in clean bandages, then stood. There's a room in back that was going to be my daughter's. It's yours now for as long as you need it. I'll bring you food. Sarah wanted to thank him, wanted to express the depth of her gratitude, but words seemed inadequate. Instead, she simply nodded. Merrick seemed to understand. He showed her to the room, a small space with a bed, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out over the valley. It was the first real bed Sarah had seen in months, and her body ached with longing at the sight of it. But first, Merrick brought her food. Beans, cornbread, and venison stew, simple fare that tasted like a feast to her empty stomach. She ate slowly, forcing herself not to gulp it down too fast. Merrick sat at the table with her, saying nothing, just keeping her company. When she finished, he showed her a pitcher of water for washing and left her alone. Sarah cleaned herself as best she could, then fell into bed fully clothed. Sleep took her before her head fully settled on the pillow. She dreamed of her family. Of her father teaching her to track, her mother singing old songs, her brother laughing as he chased lizards through the rocks. But the dreams turned dark. The red mark appeared on everything, spreading like blood. She saw Running Fox's face, twisted with hatred, saw her family falling again and again. She woke with a gasp to find dawn light creeping through the window. For a moment she didn't know where she was, panic surging through her. Then memory returned and she lay back, breathing hard. The smell of coffee and frying bacon drifted from the main room. Sarah rose carefully, testing her bandaged feet. They hurt, but the pain was bearable. She made her way to the kitchen and found Merrick at the stove, cooking breakfast with the easy competence of someone long accustomed to caring for himself. Morning, he said without turning. Sleep well? I dreamed, Sarah said quietly. Merrick nodded as if that explained everything. That'll happen for a while. Dreams are how the mind tries to make sense of what the heart can't accept. Give it time. He served breakfast and they ate in comfortable silence. Afterward, he showed her around the ranch. The horses were beautiful, well-cared-for stock that showed quality breeding. The cattle were healthy and fat on good grass. It was clear that Merrick ran a successful operation despite working alone. "Don't you have any ranch hands?" Sarah asked. Merrick shook his head. "Tried that a few times. Didn't work out. Men get nervous around someone like me. They hear the stories and start imagining things. Besides, I prefer the quiet." They were walking back toward the house when Bear started barking, his tone different now, warning rather than welcome. Merrick's hand went to the gun at his hip in an instant. "Get inside," he told Sarah quietly. "What is it?" she asked, scanning the horizon. "Don't know yet," Merrick said. "But Bear doesn't bark like that unless something's wrong." Then Sarah saw them. 4 riders approaching from the east, moving at an easy pace. They weren't Apache. These were white men, and as they drew closer, Sarah saw the glint of metal badges on their chests. "Lawmen." Merrick's jaw tightened. "Probably nothing," he said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe that. The riders entered the ranch yard and stopped. The leader was a heavy man with a thick mustache and eyes that missed nothing. He surveyed the property with professional thoroughness before settling his gaze on Merrick. "Thomas Merrick," he said. It wasn't a question. "Marshall Crawford," Merrick replied evenly. "What brings the law all the way out here?" Crawford shifted in his saddle, and Sarah noticed the 3 men behind him keeping their hands near their weapons. "Got a report from some Apache hunters," Crawford said. "Said you interfered with their tribal business, threatened them, maybe killed one of them. They're demanding justice." Merrick's expression didn't change. "They're lying. I didn't kill anyone. I stopped them from murdering a girl. That's hardly tribal business." Crawford's eyes moved to Sarah for the first time, and she felt measured and judged in that gaze. "This the girl?" he asked. When Merrick nodded, Crawford continued. "Apache girl, by the look of her. You know harboring hostile Indians is against the law, Merrick. Territory's trying to keep peace, and that means Indians stay on reservations where they belong." The casual cruelty of his words made Sarah's hands clench into fists. Hostile Indians. As if her entire people could be reduced to 2 words, as if her humanity was somehow conditional. "She's not hostile," Merrick said, his voice dangerously quiet. "She's a 17-year-old girl whose family was murdered. She's got nowhere else to go." Crawford smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Maybe so. But that's not your decision to make. Law says she needs to go to the San Carlos reservation. We'll take her there, see she's treated proper." Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. San Carlos reservation was notorious. A place where Apache from dozens of different bands were crammed together on worthless land with insufficient supplies. People died there regularly from disease, starvation, and despair. Going to San Carlos was a slower death than running Fox's bullet, but death nonetheless. "She's not going anywhere," Merrick said flatly. Crawford's smile vanished. "That's not your call, Merrick. I've got federal authority here. You want to challenge that?" The 3 deputies behind Crawford spread out slightly, their intentions clear. Sarah watched Merrick calculate the odds. 4 armed men, all expecting trouble. He could probably kill 2, maybe 3 before they got him. But he would die, and Sarah would end up at San Carlos anyway. She saw the moment he reached that same conclusion. Saw the frustration and anger flash across his face, followed by bitter acceptance. "When?" he asked quietly. Crawford's smile returned. "Now. We'll leave immediately." Sarah sat on a borrowed horse between 2 of the deputies, her wrists bound loosely in front of her. Crawford had insisted on the restraints, calling them a formality. Merrick had argued, his voice tight with controlled fury, but the marshal had been immovable. Now they rode east toward San Carlos, leaving Merrick standing in his ranch yard, helpless rage written across his face. Sarah had tried to tell him it was all right, that she was grateful for what he'd done, but the words had stuck in her throat. It wasn't all right. Nothing about this was all right. They traveled in silence for the first hour, the only sounds the creak of leather and the steady rhythm of hooves. Sarah kept her head down, appearing defeated and resigned. In truth, her mind was racing. She had survived her family's massacre, survived days of pursuit through the desert, survived running Fox's hunters. She would survive this too. The question was how. Deputy Hayes, the youngest of the 4 lawmen, rode nearest to her. He couldn't have been more than 20, with a soft face that suggested he was new to the job. He kept glancing at her with something that might have been pity or might have been curiosity. Sarah filed that information away. Weakness could be exploited. Pity could be a weapon. They stopped at midday to rest the horses. Crawford allowed Sarah to dismount, and Deputy Hayes brought her water. "Thank you," she said quietly, meeting his eyes. He flushed slightly and nodded, looking away. The other deputies laughed at something Marshal Crawford said, their voices carrying across the rocky ground. Sarah drank slowly, studying the landscape. They were following an old trail through broken country, lots of rocks and gullies, the kind of terrain that made ambushes possible. She wondered if Running Fox was out there somewhere, watching. He would know the law had taken her. Would he follow? Would he see this as an opportunity or a complication? "You ever been to San Carlos?" Hayes asked suddenly. Sarah shook her head. "My mother was there once," she lied smoothly. "Before she died. She said it was a hard place." Hayes looked uncomfortable. "It's not so bad," he said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "You'll have food, shelter. Better than running around the desert alone." Sarah wanted to scream at him, to ask if he truly believed that prison was better than freedom just because it came with food. But she swallowed her anger and nodded meekly. Hayes seemed relieved by her compliance. Good. Let him think her broken and harmless. They mounted up again and continued east. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Sarah felt sweat trickling down her spine beneath her clothes. Her feet throbbed in their bandages, and her body ached from the unfamiliar saddle. But she had endured worse. Much worse. She could endure this. As afternoon stretched toward evening, Crawford called a halt in a narrow canyon. "We'll camp here," he announced. "Hayes, you take first watch. Johnson, get a fire going." The deputies moved to obey, well practiced in the routine of making camp. Sarah was allowed to sit against a rock wall, still bound, while the men worked around her. She watched everything, memorizing details. Where each man placed his weapons. How they moved. Who was careful and who was careless. Crawford sat down near the fire and pulled out a flask, taking a long drink. "You know," he said, looking at Sarah, "Merrick's a fool. Man like him could have a good life if he'd just learned to let things go. Instead, he keeps picking fights over Indians and other lost causes. Going to get himself killed one of these days." Johnson, a wiry man with a scarred face, laughed. "Should have seen him when his squaw died. Went half crazy with grief. Talked to the army about leading patrols against Apache camps, wanted revenge on the whole tribe for some disease that killed his woman. Army turned him down, said he was too unstable." The words hit Sarah like cold water. Merrick had wanted to kill Apache? Had blamed her people for his wife's death? Her stomach churned with confusion and betrayal. But then Hayes spoke up, his voice uncertain. "That's not the whole story, though. I heard he changed his mind after a few weeks. Realized his wife wouldn't have wanted that. Told the army he'd been wrong and went back to his ranch. Been peaceful ever since." Crawford snorted. "Peaceful? Man threatened 6 Apache hunters just yesterday. Real peaceful." The conversation drifted to other topics, but Sarah barely heard. Her mind was spinning with this new information about Merrick. Had he really wanted vengeance against her people? Or was that just grief talking, the kind of mad pain that made people say things they didn't mean? She thought about the gentleness with which he'd treated her wounds, the care he'd shown in feeding her, the room he'd prepared. Those weren't the actions of someone who hated Apache. They were the actions of someone trying to make amends, to balance old wrongs with new right actions. As darkness fell, the camp settled into quiet. Hayes took his position on watch while the others rolled up in blankets near the fire. Sarah sat awake, testing her bonds. They were loose enough to be comfortable but too tight to slip free easily. She would need a blade or time to work them free. Time she didn't have. The night deepened. Stars appeared overhead, countless and indifferent. Sarah thought of her grandmother's stories about the sky, about how each star was a campfire in the spirit world where the dead gathered. If that was true, her family was up there now, watching. What would they want her to do? The answer came clearly. They would want her to survive. To live. To carry their stories forward, just as her father had commanded. She couldn't do that at San Carlos. She had to escape. But how? Hayes yawned and shifted his position, trying to stay alert. Sarah watched him through half-closed eyes, appearing to sleep while actually studying the young deputy's patterns. Every 20 minutes, he walked a circuit around the camp. The rest of the time, he sat on a rock overlooking the trail. His rifle lay across his knees, but his attention wandered. There. That was her opening. Sarah waited until Hayes started his next circuit. The moment he passed out of direct sight behind a boulder, she moved. Her fingers worked frantically at the knots binding her wrists, using techniques her father had taught her years ago. The hemp rope was rough and tight, but she found the key loop and pulled. The knot loosened. Her hands slipped free. She froze, listening. The camp remained quiet. Crawford snored loudly. Johnson muttered in his sleep. The third deputy, a silent man named Porter, lay still as death. Sarah rose slowly, every muscle screaming protest. She moved like smoke toward where the horses were picketed, each step careful and deliberate. One sound, one mistake, and it would all be over. She reached the horses and selected the nearest mount, a dark gelding with calm eyes. Her hands found the tether rope and began working the knot free. Behind her, she heard Hayes returning from his circuit. She pressed herself against the horse's side, hidden in shadow, barely breathing. Hayes passed within 10 feet of her, oblivious. He returned to his rock and sat down with another jaw-cracking yawn. Sarah finished freeing the horse and led it slowly away from camp, moving deeper into the canyon. Every step felt like it took an eternity. The horse, thankfully, moved quietly, trusting her lead. When she was 50 yards from camp, far enough that the sound would be muffled by distance and rock, she swung onto the horse's back. A shout erupted behind her. Hayes had noticed the missing horse, or maybe he'd seen her moving in the darkness. It didn't matter. Sarah kicked the horse into a gallop and raced down the canyon, praying she wouldn't run into a rock wall or a drop-off in the darkness. Behind her, the camp exploded into activity. More shouts. The sound of men scrambling for weapons and horses. But she had a head start, and she rode like her life depended on it. Because it did. The canyon opened into a wider valley, and Sarah urged the horse faster. The night air rushed past her face, cold and sharp. Her bandaged feet burned where they gripped the horse's sides, but she ignored the pain. Pain meant she was alive. Pain meant she was free. A gunshot cracked through the darkness behind her. The bullet went wide, but it told her the deputies were mounted and giving chase. Sarah leaned low over the horse's neck and rode harder. The landscape was a blur of shadows and starlight. She had no idea where she was going, only knew she had to get away. Minutes stretched into eternity. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The horse began to tire, its breathing labored. She couldn't maintain this pace much longer. Neither could her mount. Then she saw it ahead. Another canyon mouth, narrow and dark, cutting into the hills. She aimed for it and plunged into the blackness, trusting instinct and luck. The passage twisted and turned, barely wide enough for horse and rider. Sarah felt rock walls brushing her legs on both sides. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit faded, unable to follow at speed through such tight quarters. The canyon opened suddenly into a small box valley, maybe 100 yards across, surrounded by sheer walls. A dead end. Sarah's heart sank. She had trapped herself. But then she saw the cave mouth in the far wall, a black slash in the rock about 10 feet up. It was small, probably too small for a horse, but she wasn't on a horse anymore. She dismounted and slapped the gelding's rump, sending it galloping back toward the canyon entrance. Let the deputies follow the horse while she hid. She scrambled up the rock face, her injured feet screaming, and pulled herself into the cave. It was shallow but deep enough to hide in if she pressed herself against the back wall. She crawled as far back as she could go and went still, controlling her breathing, listening to the night. Voices echoed from the canyon entrance. Crawford cursing. Hayes apologizing. The sounds of horses moving around the valley floor. They had found the gelding but not her. Not yet. Time passed in agonizing slowness. Sarah's legs cramped. Her feet throbbed. But she didn't move. Finally, after what felt like hours, the voices faded. The deputies were leaving, probably assuming she'd somehow escaped back down the canyon. Sarah waited longer, making sure, before finally allowing herself to relax. She had done it. She was free. Exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she let herself sink into it. Tomorrow she would figure out what came next. Tonight, she would simply breathe and be alive. Sleep took her gently this time, without dreams. When she woke, dawn light was painting the cave entrance in shades of gold. She crawled to the opening and looked out over the valley. It was beautiful in the morning light, peaceful and untouched. For a moment, she simply appreciated it. Then she heard a horse snort below. Her hand went to her throat in panic, but when she looked down, she saw not the deputies but a single rider. Thomas Merrick sat on his roan gelding, looking up at her cave with a slight smile on his weathered face. "Figured you'd head this direction," he called up to her. "This valley was one of my wife's favorite places. She showed it to me years ago, said it was sacred ground. Good place for new beginnings." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "How did you find me?" she called back. Merrick's smile widened. I'm not called Ghost Walker for nothing. Now come on down. We've got planning to do. Sarah climbed down carefully, and when her feet touched solid ground, Merrick was there with a hand to steady her. The marshal will come after you, she said. After both of us now. I've made you a wanted man. Merrick shrugged. Let him come. I've been thinking about leaving this territory anyway. Too many bad memories, too many ghosts. Maybe it's time for both of us to find somewhere new, somewhere we can start fresh. He held out his hand. What do you say, Sarah Morning Bird? Want to see what's on the other side of these mountains? Sarah looked at his hand, scarred and steady, offering not just help but partnership. Behind her was everything she'd lost. Ahead was uncertainty and danger and a future she couldn't predict. But it was her future. Hers to choose. Hers to build. She took his hand and smiled. Let's go find out, she said. They mounted up, Merrick offering her a place behind him on the roan, and rode toward the rising sun. Behind them, the sacred valley stood empty and peaceful, keeping its secrets. Ahead lay 1,000 miles of wild country, dangerous and beautiful and free. Sarah held tight to Merrick's back as they rode, her grandmother's turquoise stone warm against her heart. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since her family died, she felt something besides grief. She felt hope.